The smell of barbecue smoke drifted through the humid Texas air as I pulled into the familiar gravel driveway of my childhood home. Cars lined both sides of the street. My sister's pristine white SUV, my brother's pickup truck, cousins' vehicles I recognized from past gatherings. The annual Henderson family reunion was in full swing, and I was already 40 minutes late. I sat in my car for a moment, adjusting my rearview mirror to check my appearance one last time. The drive from Austin had been long, and I'd spent most of it rehearsing conversations in my head, preparing for the inevitable questions about my job, my relationship status, my life choices. At 32, I was the only Henderson who hadn't followed the expected path: marriage, kids, a house in the suburbs. The sound of laughter echoed from the backyard, and I could hear my father's booming voice carrying over the crowd. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the store-bought potato salad from the passenger seat and headed toward the house. "Maya!" My Aunt Linda spotted me first, wrapping me in a hug that smelled like her signature perfume and cigarettes. "Honey, you look thin. Are you eating enough?" Before I could answer, my cousin Jake appeared, beer in hand, grinning widely. Well, if it isn't the city girl. How's the big corporate world treating you?" I forced a smile. "Can't complain." "How's the construction business?" "Booming. Just bought a new house, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths. You should come visit sometime, bring whoever you're dating these days." The familiar knot formed in my stomach. I'm actually taking a break from dating right now, focusing on my career. Jake's wife, Sarah, materialized beside him, their 2 young children clinging to her legs. "Oh, Maya, we were just talking about you. Sarah Morrison, you remember her from high school? She just got engaged to that doctor from Dallas. Such a beautiful ring." I nodded politely, the comparison hanging in the air like the Texas heat. This was exactly what I'd been dreading. The backyard was bustling with activity. Long tables covered in checkered tablecloths groaned under the weight of casseroles, desserts, and my grandmother's famous fried chicken. Children ran between the adults, their shrieks of delight mixing with the steady hum of conversation. My father stood near the grill, spatula in hand, holding court with a group of relatives I hadn't seen in years. "Maya!" My mother appeared at my elbow, her face lighting up with relief. "There you are. I was starting to worry you'd changed your mind." "Traffic was terrible," I lied, squeezing her hand. "Everything looks wonderful, Mom." She beamed, but I caught the slight tension around her eyes. "Your father's been asking about you. Well, you know how he gets at these things." I knew exactly how he got. My father, Robert Henderson, was a man who measured success in traditional metrics: marriage certificates, mortgage payments, grandchildren's school photos. He'd built his construction company from nothing, providing well for his family, and he expected his children to follow suit. My older sister Jennifer had delivered perfectly. Doctor husband, 2 kids, house in the right neighborhood. My younger brother Marcus was well on his way, engaged to his college sweetheart, working at Dad's company, already talking about starting a family. Then there was me, the marketing consultant who lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, drove a 10-year-old Honda, and had never brought anyone home for Christmas. "Maya, darling," my grandmother's voice cut through my thoughts. At 85, Grandma Rose was still sharp as a tack and twice as intimidating. "Come here and tell me about this job of yours. I still don't understand what marketing consulting means." I spent the next hour making rounds, catching up with relatives, deflecting questions about my love life, and trying to ignore the subtle looks of pity from the married cousins. The conversation always seemed to circle back to what I was lacking: a husband, children, a house, stability. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, Dad called for everyone's attention. The familiar ritual was beginning, the toast that officially kicked off dinner. Everyone gathered around as he climbed onto a wooden crate he'd brought from the garage, raising his beer high. "Welcome, everyone, to another Henderson family reunion." His voice boomed across the yard, commanding attention. "It's been another good year for our family, and I want to take a moment to recognize some special achievements." My stomach clenched. I knew what was coming. First, let's hear it for Jennifer, who just got promoted to head of pediatrics at Dallas Methodist. We're so proud of her and David and those beautiful grandkids of ours. Applause erupted as Jennifer blushed and waved, her husband beaming beside her. And Marcus, who's been working his butt off at the company and just bought his first house. Plus, he's giving us another daughter-in-law next spring when he marries the lovely Amanda. More applause, more beaming faces. I felt my hands trembling slightly as I clutched my beer. To Jake and Sarah, who just welcomed their 3rd child, little Bobby, named after his grandpa. Dad grinned, gesturing toward my cousin. And to my brother Tom, who just celebrated 30 years at the fire department. He continued down the list, acknowledging achievements, milestones, new babies, job promotions. Each name felt like a weight on my chest. I found myself calculating, surely he'd mention my recent promotion to senior consultant, or the fact that I'd finally paid off my student loans. or the apartment I'd worked so hard to afford in Austin. And of course, Dad's voice grew warmer, to my beautiful wife, Carol, who's been the backbone of this family for 35 years. Without her, none of us would be here tonight. The applause was thunderous. Mom wiped away tears, and I felt a genuine smile cross my face for the first time all evening. So here's to the Henderson family. Dad raised his beer higher. To all of our successes, our achievements, and our bright futures. To everyone who's made us proud, he paused, and his eyes swept across the crowd. They landed on me for just a moment, and I felt my heart skip. This was it, my moment. Except the disappointment, he finished with a chuckle. We won't talk about that tonight. The words hit me like a physical blow. A few people laughed awkwardly, thinking it was a joke. Others shifted uncomfortably, sensing the cruelty beneath the humor. But I knew. I felt it in the way his eyes had passed over me, in the slight smirk on his lips, in the way he'd deliberately not used my name. The disappointment, that's what I was to him. My vision blurred, and I felt the blood drain from my face. The beer slipped from my numb fingers, crashing to the ground and splattering foam across my sandals. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence that followed. Maya, Mom started, reaching for me, but I was already backing away. I need to go, I whispered, not trusting my voice to be steady. Honey, wait, but I was already pushing through the crowd, past the confused faces of my relatives, past the children still playing, past the tables laden with food I suddenly couldn't stomach. I reached my car with shaking hands, fumbling for my keys. Behind me, I could hear voices. Mom calling my name, Jennifer's voice sharp with what might have been anger, someone saying, "Robert, what the hell was that about?" But I couldn't turn around. I couldn't face them. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine when my own father had just publicly labeled me the family failure. The engine started on the second try, and I pulled out of the driveway with gravel spinning under my tires. In my rearview mirror, I saw my mother standing in the doorway, her hand pressed to her mouth, watching me drive away. The disappointment. The words echoed in my mind as I drove through the darkening Texas countryside, leaving behind the warm glow of the reunion, the laughter, the family I'd apparently never quite belonged to. I drove away that night, but more than that, I drove away from the person I'd been trying so hard to be, the person who kept coming back hoping for acceptance that would never come. The highway stretched ahead of me, empty and dark, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly alone. The dashboard clock read 9:47 p.m. when I finally pulled into my apartment complex in Austin. I'd driven the entire 2 hours in a haze, my mind replaying the moment over and over like a broken record, except the disappointment. The words had become a mantra of humiliation, each repetition cutting deeper than the last. My phone had been buzzing incessantly during the drive. Missed calls from Mom, Jennifer, even Marcus. Text messages that I couldn't bring myself to read piled up in my notifications. I turned it off completely and climbed the stairs to my second-floor apartment, each step feeling heavier than the last. The familiar comfort of my small space, my carefully chosen furniture, my bookshelf filled with personal development books, my kitchen where I'd learned to cook for one. All of it felt different now, contaminated by the truth I'd been running from. I was a disappointment. I sat on my couch, still in my reunion clothes, and finally allowed myself to cry. Not the controlled tears I'd held back during the drive, but deep, body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere I'd kept locked away for years. When had it started? When had I become the source of my father's shame instead of his pride? I thought back to high school when I'd been class president, editor of the school paper, headed to college on a partial scholarship. Dad had been proud then, bragging to his friends about his smart daughter. But somewhere along the way, the pride had curdled into disappointment. Maybe it was when I'd chosen communications over engineering, despite his insistence that I needed a practical degree. Or when I'd turned down my first marriage proposal at 24, telling him I wasn't ready, that I wanted to focus on my career first. Or when I'd moved to Austin instead of staying in Millbrook, choosing opportunities over proximity. Each decision had felt right at the time, felt like me choosing my own path. But now, in the harsh light of public humiliation, I wondered if I'd been wrong all along. My laptop sat open on the coffee table, and almost without thinking, I began to type. LinkedIn first, scrolling through the updates from college friends, the engagement announcements, the baby photos, the job promotions that somehow seemed more substantial than my own achievements. Then Facebook, where the evidence of my failure was even more stark. Jennifer's feed was a carefully curated showcase of family perfection, professional photos from their last vacation, the kids' school achievements, date nights with her husband. Marcus's page showed him and Amanda house hunting, picking out engagement rings, building the life everyone expected. And my page? Work updates that nobody commented on, pictures from conferences that looked lonely even to me, check-ins at restaurants where I'd eaten alone. I closed the laptop and stared at the blank TV screen, seeing my reflection staring back, mascara smudged, hair disheveled, still wearing the outfit I'd carefully chosen to try to fit in. The apartment felt suffocating. I changed into running clothes and headed out into the Austin night, needing to move, to feel something other than the weight of inadequacy pressing down on my chest. The city was alive around me, couples walking hand in hand, groups of friends spilling out of bars, the sounds of life being lived fully. I ran through the downtown streets, past the murals and food trucks, past the evidence of the vibrant life I'd built here. But all I could think about was the silence that had followed my father's words, the way conversation had stopped, the way people had looked at me with pity or confusion, the way I'd proven him right by running away. I ran until my lungs burned, until the physical pain was sharp enough to cut through the emotional fog. When I finally stopped, I found myself at the park where I sometimes came to read on weekend mornings. The swings moved slightly in the breeze, and I sat down on one, feeling absurdly childish but needing the gentle motion. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I turned it back on without thinking. A text from Mom. "Honey, please call me. We need to talk about tonight." Another from Jennifer. "Dad was out of line. Please don't let him make you feel bad about yourself." Even one from Marcus. "That was messed up. You okay?" But no message from Dad. Of course not. He'd said what he meant to say, and he wasn't the type to take it back. I thought about my life in Austin, the job I'd worked so hard to get, the clients who trusted me with their biggest marketing challenges, the small but comfortable life I'd built. I thought about last month's performance review, where my boss had called me invaluable and hinted at a partnership track. I thought about the volunteer work I did with literacy programs, the friends I'd made through my book club, the weekend art classes I'd finally started taking. None of it felt real anymore. All I could see was the disappointment, the way I'd failed to meet the expectations that had been set for me before I was even old enough to understand what they were. The swing creaked softly as I rocked back and forth, and I realized I was crying again. Not the angry tears from earlier, but something deeper. Grief for the relationship I'd thought I had with my father, for the family acceptance I'd apparently been deluding myself about, for the version of myself that had walked into that reunion believing she belonged. A text from an unknown number appeared on my screen. "Maya, this is Jake. I wanted you to know that what Uncle Robert said was wrong. You're not a disappointment. You're successful and independent, and that's something to be proud of. Don't let him make you think otherwise." I stared at the message, surprised by the kindness from someone I'd barely spoken to in years, but even his support felt hollow. If I wasn't a disappointment, why had those words landed so hard? Why did they feel true? The truth was, I'd been carrying this feeling for years. The sense that I was always falling short, always choosing the wrong path, always defending decisions that felt right to me but wrong to everyone else. Tonight had just been the moment when it was finally spoken aloud. I walked home slowly, the Austin skyline glittering around me like a promise I'd never quite managed to keep. My apartment felt different when I returned. Not like a home, but like a hiding place. A place where I could pretend I was building something meaningful, while my real life remained perpetually out of reach. I made a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, people were living the lives they were supposed to live. They were falling in love, raising families, making their parents proud. They were becoming the people they'd always been meant to be. And I was here, alone, finally understanding that all my efforts at independence and self-sufficiency had just been elaborate ways of avoiding the truth my father had so clearly articulated. I was the disappointment, the one who'd taken the wrong path, made the wrong choices, become the wrong person. The question now was, what was I going to do about it? I called in sick to work the next morning, something I'd never done unless I was actually ill. My boss, Patricia, sounded concerned when I told her I had a family emergency. She knew I rarely took time off and had never missed a client meeting. "Take care of yourself, Maya. The Henderson account can wait." The Henderson account. Even my professional life was tied to my family name, a constant reminder of expectations and legacy. I hung up and pulled the covers over my head, trying to block out the morning light streaming through my bedroom windows. By noon, I had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Mom had called 6 times. Jennifer had driven the kids to school and called from her car. Even my grandmother had somehow figured out how to text. "That boy of mine is a fool. Call me." I finally answered when Jennifer called for the 3rd time in an hour. "Maya, thank God. I've been worried sick." Her voice was tight with the controlled emotion she'd perfected during her medical training. "Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm home. I'm not okay, Jen." What Dad said was inexcusable. Completely inexcusable. "David and I left right after you did. We couldn't stay after that." I felt a small spark of gratitude that my sister had stood up for me, even if it was after the fact. "Did he say anything? After I left?" There was a pause. He tried to play it off like it was a joke. Said everyone was being too sensitive, but Mom was furious. I've never seen her that angry at him. She made him sleep in the guest room. The image of my parents fighting over what had happened made my stomach clench. I don't want to cause problems between them. Maya, listen to me. Jennifer's voice took on the firm tone she used with difficult patience. You didn't cause anything. He did. What he said was cruel and wrong, and it says everything about him and nothing about you. But it felt like it said everything about me. Maybe he's right, though. Maybe I am a disappointment. Stop it. Stop that right now. She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her kids laughing in the background. You want to know what I think? I think Dad's threatened by you. Threatened? By me. You're the only one of us who left. The only one who built something completely independent of him. Marcus works for his company. I married into a family he approves of. We all stayed close to home. But you went out and made your own life, your own success, without needing his approval or his connections. I'd never thought of it that way. That doesn't make what he said okay. No, it doesn't, but it might explain why he said it. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, thinking about Jennifer's words. Was it possible that my independence had been threatening rather than disappointing? That my refusal to follow the expected path had been seen as rebellion rather than self-determination? My phone rang again. This time it was Mom. Maya, honey, I'm so sorry. Her voice was thick with tears. I'm so sorry you had to hear that. I'm sorry I didn't stop him before he said it. It's not your fault, Mom. It is, though. I've watched him make those comments for years. The little digs, the comparisons, the way he talks about your choices. I should have said something sooner. What comments? Mom sighed deeply. When you got promoted last year, instead of being proud, he said you were playing house in Austin. When you bought your apartment, he said you were wasting money on rent instead of investing in a real home. When you turned down that job offer in Dallas, he said you were too good for your own family. Each example hit like a small slap. I'd shared those milestones with my parents, looking for their pride and support, never knowing that Dad was interpreting them as rejections. I thought he was proud of me, I whispered. He is, sweetheart. He's just, your father has very specific ideas about what success looks like. And when you don't fit into those boxes, he doesn't know how to understand what you've accomplished. So instead, he calls me a disappointment in front of the entire family. He was drunk, Maya. Not that it's an excuse, but he'd been drinking all afternoon. He's ashamed of what he said. Is he? Because he hasn't called me. Another pause. He's stubborn. You know that. He's embarrassed. And when your father is embarrassed, he doubles down instead of apologizing. I thought about all the times Dad had been wrong over the years. Business decisions, arguments with neighbors, conflicts with Mom, and how rare it was for him to admit fault. Pride was his armor, and removing it felt like vulnerability he couldn't afford. I can't do this anymore, Mom. I can't keep coming to these things and pretending everything is fine when he clearly thinks I'm a failure. You're not a failure, Maya. You're successful and independent and strong. You're everything I hoped you'd become, but I'm not everything he hoped I'd become. No, she said quietly. You're not. But maybe that's not your problem to fix. We talked for another hour, and I felt some of the crushing weight lift from my chest. Mom told me about the fight she'd had with Dad, how she'd told him he needed to apologize, how he'd stormed out of the house early that morning to go to work. He'll come around, she said. He has to. He can't lose you over his pride. But I wasn't sure I wanted him to come around. The damage felt too deep, too public, too humiliating to simply forgive and move on. After we hung up, I did something I'd never done before. I started researching therapists in Austin. If I was going to figure out how to move forward, I needed help understanding why my father's words had devastated me so completely. Dr. Sarah Chen had an opening the following week. Her profile said she specialized in family dynamics and self-worth issues. I booked the appointment before I could change my mind. That evening, I went for a walk in my neighborhood, really seeing it for the first time in months. The tree-lined streets, the coffee shops I'd never tried, the community garden where neighbors worked together on weekend mornings. I'd been so focused on what I didn't have that I'd stopped noticing what I did have. At the bookstore on the corner, I bought a journal and sat in the cafe section, writing down everything I could remember about the night before. Not just the humiliation, but the moments before it. The way Aunt Linda had hugged me, the genuine interest in my work, the children playing in the backyard. I wrote about the life I'd built in Austin, the challenges I'd overcome, the goals I'd achieved. I wrote about the fear I'd been carrying, not just of being alone, but of being seen as less than because I was alone. When I finally looked up, the cafe was nearly empty, and I'd filled 12 pages with thoughts I'd never allowed myself to have. The disappointment. Dad's words still echoed, but they were starting to sound different. Not like a truth I needed to accept, but like an opinion I could choose to reject. I was beginning to understand that the person I'd become wasn't wrong. It was just different from what had been expected. And maybe, for the first time in my life, different was enough. 3 days later, Dad showed up at my apartment. I was working from home, still not quite ready to face the office small talk and concerned looks from colleagues who might have heard about the reunion through the small-town network that connected Austin to everywhere else in Texas. The knock on my door was firm and familiar, the same way he'd knocked on my bedroom door when I was a teenager and had broken curfew. Through the peephole, I could see him standing on my doorstep, shifting his weight from foot to foot in a way that betrayed nervousness beneath his typical stoic exterior. He wore his good jeans and a button-down shirt, what Mom called his apologizing clothes. Though I'd seen them so rarely, I'd almost forgotten they existed. I considered not answering. Part of me wanted to let him stand there, to make him feel even a fraction of the rejection I'd experienced. But I opened the door anyway, muscle memory of 32 years of being his daughter overriding my desire for petty revenge. Maya. He nodded, as if we were business associates rather than family. Can I come in? I stepped aside without speaking, gesturing toward the small living room that had never felt smaller. He looked around, taking in the space I'd carefully curated over the past 3 years. The art prints from local artists, the bookshelf organized by color, the plants I'd somehow managed to keep alive. Nice place, he said, and I could hear the surprise in his voice. Very you. Thanks. I remained standing, arms crossed, waiting for him to explain why he'd driven 2 hours to see me. He sat heavily on my couch, suddenly looking older than his 58 years. Your mother says I need to apologize. Is that what you're here to do? Because Mom told you to? I'm here because… He stopped, ran a hand through his graying hair. Hell, Maya, I don't know why I'm here. I know I messed up. I know what I said was wrong. Do you? Because it didn't sound like a mistake. It sounded like something you'd been thinking for a long time. He flinched, and I felt a small satisfaction at landing a hit. I was drunk. I say stupid things when I'm drunk. Drunk words are sober thoughts, Dad. Where'd you hear that? College. You know, that education you paid for that apparently didn't lead to anything worthwhile. He stood up abruptly, pacing to my window that looked out over the complex's courtyard. I never said your education was worthless. You didn't have to. It's been pretty clear for years that nothing I've accomplished measures up to your standards. That's not true, isn't it? I moved to stand across from him, the coffee table between us like a barrier. When's the last time you told someone you were proud of me? When's the last time you bragged about my job, my apartment, my life? He was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the families playing in the courtyard below. I don't understand your life, Maya. I don't understand why you want to be alone. I'm not alone by choice, Dad. I'm alone by circumstance. There's a difference, but you could change that. You could move back home, find someone local, settle down, like Jennifer, like Marcus. They're happy. And you think I'm not? He turned to face me, and I saw something raw in his expression. Are you? Are you happy here, in this apartment? Working all the time, no one to come home to? The question hit harder than I'd expected because I'd been asking myself the same thing. I'm building something, Dad. A career, a life. It might not look like what you wanted for me, but it's mine. A career isn't a life, Maya. A job won't take care of you when you're old, won't give you children, won't what? Won't make you proud? Won't give you grandchildren to show off? Won't fit into your idea of what success looks like? It's not about me, isn't it? I stepped closer, anger rising in my chest. Because it seems like it's all about you. Your expectations, your approval, your definition of what makes a life worth living. I just want you to be secure, to have someone who cares about you. I have people who care about me. I have friends, colleagues, a community here. Just because I'm not married doesn't mean I'm alone. But you are alone, Maya. You came to that reunion alone. You'll go home alone. You'll wake up alone tomorrow. How is that not alone? The words stung because they echoed my own fears. The ones I'd been battling since the reunion. Being alone isn't the same as being lonely, Dad. And being married isn't the same as being happy. Your mother and I are happy. Are you? Because you've been sleeping in the guest room since Sunday night. He sat back down heavily. She's mad at me. She should be. We all should be. I know what I said was wrong, Maya. I know it hurt you. But I don't know how to talk to you anymore. I don't know how to relate to the person you've become. You could try asking me about my life instead of judging it. I do ask. No, you interrogate. You ask about my job so you can compare it to Jennifer's. You ask about my dating life so you can point out what's missing. You ask about my apartment so you can explain why homeownership is better. You don't ask because you want to understand. You ask because you want to fix. He was quiet for a long time, and I could see him processing what I'd said. Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't know how to talk to you. So learn. Start by telling me why you really think I'm a disappointment. I don't think you're a disappointment. Dad, I don't. I think you're lost. I think you're so busy proving you don't need anyone that you've forgotten how to let people in. I think you're wasting your life trying to be something you're not. What am I trying to be? Independent, self-sufficient. Like you don't need family, don't need help, don't need anyone. Maybe because every time I do need help, it comes with judgment. Every time I share something I'm proud of, it gets measured against someone else's achievements. Every time I make a choice that's right for me, it gets questioned and criticized. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From ending up alone, from regretting the choices you're making, from waking up one day and realizing you've built a life that looks good on paper but feels empty. I sat down across from him, suddenly exhausted. Do you think my life feels empty? I think you work too much. I think you're always trying to prove something. I think you're afraid to settle down because you're afraid of being ordinary. Maybe I am afraid of being ordinary. Maybe I'm afraid of disappearing into someone else's life and losing myself. Maybe I'm afraid of becoming someone who defines herself by her relationships instead of her accomplishments. There's nothing wrong with being defined by your relationships, Maya. There's nothing wrong with being a wife and mother. There's nothing wrong with being those things if you choose them. But there's also nothing wrong with choosing something else. But what if you regret it? What if you wake up at 45 and realize you've missed your chance? What if I wake up at 45 and realize I spent my entire life trying to live up to someone else's expectations instead of creating my own happiness? We sat in silence for a while, the weight of years of miscommunication and misunderstanding settling between us. Finally, he spoke. I'm sorry, Maya, for what I said at the reunion, for making you feel like you're not enough, for not understanding that your life might be exactly what you want it to be. Thank you. But I'm not sorry for worrying about you. I'm not sorry for wanting more for you. That's what fathers do. I know. But maybe you could trust me to figure out what more means for me. He nodded slowly. I can try. I probably won't be good at it, but I can try. It wasn't everything I'd hoped for, but it was a start. We talked for another hour, and for the first time in years, it felt like a conversation rather than a confrontation. He asked about my work, really asked, not just waiting for his turn to speak. He looked at the photos on my walls, the books on my shelves, the life I'd built. When he left, he hugged me goodbye, and I felt like maybe we'd found a way to begin rebuilding what had been damaged. But as I closed the door behind him, I realized that his apology, while necessary, hadn't solved the deeper problem. The question wasn't whether my father approved of my life, it was whether I did. And that was something I'd have to figure out for myself. My first therapy session with Dr. Chen was scheduled for Thursday morning. I'd never been to therapy before, and I wasn't sure what to expect. The office was smaller than I'd imagined, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs that seemed designed to make you want to confess your deepest secrets. Dr. Chen was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes and a manner that was both professional and warm. She didn't take notes during our conversation, which somehow made it feel less clinical. Tell me about what brought you here, she said, settling into her chair with a cup of tea. I told her about the reunion, about my father's words, about the conversation we'd had in my apartment. I told her about the years of feeling like I was constantly defending my choices, constantly falling short of expectations I'd never agreed to. How long have you felt like a disappointment? She asked. I don't know. Maybe always. Maybe since I chose communications over engineering in college. Maybe since I turned down my first serious boyfriend's proposal. Maybe since I moved to Austin. Those were all choices you made because they felt right to you at the time? Yes. And looking back, do you regret any of them? I thought about it. No, not really. Each choice led me to where I am now, and I like where I am, or I thought I did, until Sunday night. What changed on Sunday night? I realized that no matter what I accomplished, no matter how happy I was, my father would never see it as enough. And maybe part of me agreed with him. Tell me about that part. I spent the next 40 minutes unpacking years of internalized expectations. The voice in my head that whispered I was selfish for prioritizing my career. The guilt I felt when I saw my friends' family photos on social media. The way I'd started to feel defensive about my choices, as if I needed to justify them to everyone I met. It sounds like you've been carrying two different versions of yourself, Dr. Chen said. The person you actually are, and the person you think you should be. Which one feels more authentic to you? The person I actually am, I said without hesitation. But the person I think I should be is louder. Where do you think that voice comes from? My family, society, everywhere really. There's this narrative that women aren't complete without marriage and children, that success doesn't count if you're alone. And I bought into it, even when I was actively choosing something different. What would it look like to silence that voice? I didn't have an answer for that, but the question followed me home and stayed with me for the rest of the week. On Saturday, I did something I'd never done before. I threw a dinner party. Not a networking event or a book club meeting, but an actual dinner party with the friends I'd made in Austin. My book club friend Sarah, my colleague Michael and his partner David, my neighbor Elena, who'd become a close friend over shared morning coffee. I spent the day cooking, really cooking, not just heating up takeout. I made my grandmother's lasagna recipe, the one she'd taught me during childhood summers, but I'd never attempted on my own. I bought wine, lit candles, set my small dining table with the good plates I'd been saving for special occasions. "This is amazing," Sarah said, looking around my apartment. "I had no idea you could cook like this." "Neither did I, honestly." "What's the occasion?" Michael asked, raising his wine glass. I guess I realized I've been living my life like I'm waiting for it to start. Like the good plates and the fancy recipes were for some future version of myself who had earned them. "And what changed?" Elena asked. I thought about my father's visit, about the therapy session, about the weeks of questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. I realized I already am that version of myself. I don't need permission to use the good plates. We talked until nearly midnight, about work and relationships and dreams and fears. I told them about the reunion, about my father's words, about the crisis of confidence that had followed. They listened without judgment, shared their own stories of family expectations and personal choices. "You know what's funny?" David said as they were getting ready to leave. "You talk about being alone, but you're not alone. You have this whole community of people who care about you." "But it's not the same as family," I said automatically. "Isn't it?" Sarah asked. "I mean, these are the people you choose to share your life with. The people who show up when you need them. The people who know you and accept you as you are. That sounds like family to me." After they left, I sat in my living room surrounded by the comfortable mess of a successful dinner party. Empty wine glasses, crumpled napkins, the lingering scent of good food and laughter. For the first time in weeks, I felt completely content. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the photos from the evening. In one, we were all laughing at something Michael had said. In another, Sarah and Elena were deep in conversation about a book they'd both loved. In a third, David was helping me clear dishes while the others relaxed on the couch. It looked like a life, a full, rich, meaningful life. I thought about posting one of the photos on social media, then stopped myself. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone else. This was about recognizing what I already had. On Sunday morning, I called my grandmother. "Maya, sweetheart, how are you holding up?" "I'm okay, Grandma Rose. Actually, I'm better than okay." "Good. Your father was an ass the other night." I laughed, surprised by her bluntness. "He came to see me. We talked. And I think we understand each other a little better now. But Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Were you disappointed when you had to work outside the home after Grandpa died?" There was a pause. "Disappointed? Honey, I was terrified. But working at the school district was one of the best things that ever happened to me. I discovered I was good at things I'd never had the chance to try. I made friends. I felt useful. I had my own money for the first time in my life. But didn't people judge you for not remarrying? For raising Dad alone?" "Oh, they sure did. Plenty of folks had opinions about what I should do, who I should marry, how I should live. But you know what I learned? Other people's opinions don't pay your bills or sing you to sleep at night. Dad never told me that story. Your father sees what he wants to see. He remembers the struggle, the times I was tired or worried about money. He doesn't remember the pride I felt when I got promoted, or the satisfaction of making my own decisions. Do you think he's afraid I'll struggle like you did? I think he's afraid you'll be as strong as I was, and that threatens his idea of what women are supposed to need." After we hung up, I sat with her words for a long time. My grandmother had been widowed at 35 with a young son to raise. She'd worked, built a career, owned her own home, lived independently until she was 80. She'd been alone, but she'd never been lonely or unfulfilled. Maybe the problem wasn't that I was becoming someone unexpected. Maybe the problem was that I was becoming exactly who I was supposed to be, and that frightened people who needed me to stay small and dependent. That afternoon, I drove to the state park outside Austin, the one I'd been meaning to visit for months but never had time for. I hiked the trail to the overlook, where you could see the whole city spread out below. The downtown skyline, the university campus, the neighborhoods where hundreds of thousands of people were living their own versions of complicated, imperfect, beautiful lives. I thought about my father's question. Was I happy? Really, truly happy? Standing there, looking out over the city I'd chosen, thinking about the career I'd built, the friendships I'd cultivated, the person I'd become, I realized the answer was yes. Not perfectly happy, not without moments of doubt or loneliness or fear, but fundamentally, deeply satisfied with the life I'd created. The disappointment, that's what my father saw when he looked at me. But what I saw, standing on that overlook, was something else entirely. I saw a woman who'd had the courage to choose her own path, even when it was lonely, who'd built something meaningful from nothing, who'd learned to take care of herself, who'd refused to settle for less than what felt true. I saw someone who was exactly where she was supposed to be. The next few weeks brought a shift I hadn't expected. Word of the reunion incident had spread through our extended family network, and my phone started ringing with calls from cousins and aunts I hadn't heard from in years. Aunt Linda called first. "Honey, I've been thinking about what your father said, and I wanted you to know that some of us are proud of what you've accomplished." Then my cousin Jake's wife, Sarah. "I hope you know that a lot of us look at your life and feel inspired. You're doing exactly what I wish I'd had the courage to do. Even my great aunt Margaret, Dad's older sister who'd never married and built a successful nursing career in the 1960s, reached out. Your father forgets that some of the strongest women in our family chose their own paths. Don't let him make you forget that either. Each conversation revealed perspectives I'd never considered. I'd been so focused on the disapproval that I'd missed the quiet admiration, the support that had been there all along. At work, I found myself engaging differently too. In our weekly team meeting, when Patricia mentioned the possibility of opening a satellite office in Denver, I surprised myself by expressing interest in leading the expansion. Really? Patricia looked pleased. It would mean relocating, at least initially. Probably 6 months to a year getting things established. I think a change of scenery might be exactly what I need. After the meeting, Michael pulled me aside. Denver, huh? That's a big move. Maybe it's time for a big move. What about Austin? Your life here. My life here will still be here when I get back. And if it's not, maybe that means it was time for something new. The conversation with Patricia sparked something in me. For years, I'd been so focused on proving that my choices were valid that I'd stopped making new choices altogether. I'd become defensive about my life instead of actively creating it. That weekend, I started researching Denver. I looked at neighborhoods, job markets, outdoor activities. I'd always talked about wanting to be closer to mountains, to learn to ski, to have seasons that actually changed. Maybe this was my chance. I called Jennifer to tell her about the opportunity. Denver? Maya, that's amazing. You've always wanted to live somewhere with real winters. You don't think it's running away? From what? Dad's opinion? Who cares about Dad's opinion? I care, apparently, more than I want to. Look, I love Dad, but he's stuck in 1985. He thinks women should get married right out of college and have babies before 30. The fact that he can't appreciate what you've built says nothing about you and everything about his limitations. When did you get so wise? Medical school taught me to look at symptoms objectively. Dad's disapproval is a symptom of his own fears, not a diagnosis of your life. I decided to give myself a month to really consider the Denver opportunity. During that time, I threw myself into exploring what Austin had to offer. Museums I'd never visited, restaurants I'd been meaning to try, events I'd always been too busy for. At a gallery opening in East Austin, I met a photographer named Daniel who was documenting the changing face of the city. We struck up a conversation about gentrification and art and ended up talking until the gallery closed. Want to get coffee? He asked as we were ushered out. It's 9 p.m. Okay, want to get wine? I surprised myself by saying yes. We went to a wine bar I'd walked past hundreds of times but never entered, and talked about photography, travel, the books we were reading. He was intelligent and funny, recently divorced, navigating his own questions about what came next. Are you dating? He asked as we split a second bottle. Not actively. I've been reassessing my priorities. What kind of reassessing? I told him about the reunion, about my father's words, about the crisis of identity that had followed. He listened without trying to fix anything or offer advice. That's brutal, he said when I finished, but also kind of liberating, right? Now you know exactly where you stand with him, and you can decide what to do with that information. What do you mean? You can keep trying to earn his approval, or you can stop caring whether you have it. Is it that simple? Nothing's that simple, but maybe it's that clear. We started seeing each other casually. Dinners, concerts, long walks through the neighborhoods we were both still discovering. Daniel was the first man I'd dated in Austin who didn't seem threatened by my independence or eager to change me. He had his own full life, his own ambitions, his own reasons for being cautious about commitment. This is nice, I told him after we'd been seeing each other for a few weeks. What is? This. Dating someone who doesn't want to fix me or complete me or whatever. Dating someone who likes me as I am. Why would I want to fix you? You're not broken. It was such a simple statement, but it hit me like a revelation. I wasn't broken. I didn't need fixing. I needed someone who could see that. One evening, while Daniel was cooking dinner in my kitchen, he was a much better cook than I was, my phone rang. It was Marcus. Hey sis, how are you doing? I'm good. Really good, actually. How are the wedding plans coming? They're complicated. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Amanda and I have been talking and we want to do something small, family only, but we want to make sure you'll be there. Of course I'll be there. Even if Dad is there, even after what happened. Marcus, it's your wedding. I'm not going to let Dad's issues keep me from celebrating you and Amanda. Good, because I was thinking, would you maybe consider being my best man, best woman, whatever the title is? I was quiet for a moment, touched by the gesture. What about your college friends? The guys from work? They're great, but you're the one who's always believed in me. Even when I was screwing up in high school, even when I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life, you never judged me for taking time to figure things out, because there's nothing wrong with taking time to figure things out. Exactly. And I've watched Dad give you grief for years about your choices, and I've always thought he was wrong. You're the strongest person I know, Maya. You've built this amazing life entirely on your own terms." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen watching Daniel move around with comfortable familiarity and felt something settle into place. This was what contentment felt like. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of alignment between who I was and how I was living. "Good news?" Daniel asked, noticing my expression. "My little brother asked me to be his best woman." "That's sweet. Are you going to do it?" "Yeah, I think I am, even though it means facing your father again." "Especially because it means facing my father again. But this time, I'll be facing him as someone who knows exactly who she is and what she's worth." Daniel smiled and handed me a glass of wine. "Here's to knowing what you're worth. Here's to not needing anyone else's permission to claim it." As we clinked glasses, I realized that something fundamental had shifted. I was still the same person who'd driven away from that reunion in tears, but I was no longer the person who believed those tears were justified by anything other than surprise and hurt. I was no longer willing to be the disappointment in someone else's story. I was ready to be the hero in my own. Marcus and Amanda's wedding was set for a crisp October morning at a small chapel outside Austin. They'd chosen fall specifically because it was my favorite season, and Amanda had insisted on incorporating sunflowers, my favorite flower, into the decorations. The night before the ceremony, there was a small rehearsal dinner at Mom and Dad's house. I drove down from Austin with a mixture of nervousness and determination, Daniel riding beside me for moral support. We'd been dating for 3 months now, and while it was still early, it felt right to have him there. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked as we pulled into the familiar driveway. "As ready as I'll ever be." The house was warm and bustling with activity. Amanda's parents had driven in from San Antonio, and a few close family friends were helping with last-minute preparations. I hugged Mom, who whispered, "I'm so proud of you," in my ear, and greeted Jennifer and David, who'd driven down from Dallas with the kids. Dad was on the back porch, manning the grill as always. When he saw me, he nodded. Not the enthusiastic greeting I might have hoped for, but not the cold shoulder I'd feared either. "Maya," he said when I approached. "This is Daniel?" "Yes, Dad, this is Daniel. Daniel, my father, Robert." They shook hands, and I watched Dad size up this man I'd brought home. Daniel handled it with grace, asking about the grill setup and complimenting the yard in a way that felt genuine rather than calculated. "You a photographer?" Dad asked, having been briefed by Mom. "I am. Mostly documentary work, some commercial projects. Make a living at that?" "Dad," I started, but Daniel held up a hand. "It's okay. Yes, sir, I do. It took a few years to build the client base, but I'm doing well now." "Good. Important to be able to support yourself." I bristled at the implication, but Daniel seemed unfazed. "Absolutely. And Maya's been teaching me about the business side of freelancing. She's incredibly knowledgeable about marketing and client relations." It was a subtle redirect, turning Dad's focus to my expertise rather than my relationship status. I felt a surge of gratitude for his understanding of the family dynamics he was walking into. The evening progressed more smoothly than I'd expected. Over dinner, Marcus stood up to give a toast. "I wanted to thank everyone for being here tonight, especially my sister Maya, who's agreed to stand up with me tomorrow." He looked directly at me, his expression serious. "Maya's always been the one who taught me that there's more than one way to build a good life. She showed me that success isn't about following someone else's plan. It's about having the courage to create your own." I felt tears prick my eyes, and when I glanced at Dad, I saw something that might have been understanding cross his face. Later, as people were saying their goodbyes, Dad pulled me aside. "Can we talk for a minute?" We walked out to the front porch, where the October air was crisp and clear. Dad sat heavily in the swing he'd installed when Jennifer and I were kids, and I took the wicker chair across from him. "I've been doing some thinking since our conversation at your apartment," he said. "About what you said, about learning to ask instead of judging." "Okay, so I'm asking, are you happy, Maya? Really happy?" I thought about the question that had haunted me for months. "Yeah, Dad, I am. Not perfect, not without challenges, but happy, fulfilled, even without the traditional things." "You mean marriage and kids?" "Yeah, I'm not against those things, Dad. If the right relationship comes along, if circumstances align for children, I'm open to it. But I'm not going to chase those things just to check boxes or meet other people's expectations. And if they never happen, then I'll have lived a life I chose, doing work I love, surrounded by people who care about me. That's not a consolation prize. That's a victory." He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the street where I'd learned to ride a bike, where Marcus had crashed his first car, where Jennifer had waited for prom dates. "I owe you a real apology," he finally said. "Not because your mother made me, but because I was wrong. What I said at the reunion was cruel and unfair, and it came from my own fears, not from any truth about who you are." "What are you afraid of, Dad?" "That I failed you somehow, that I didn't prepare you for the world, didn't teach you what you needed to know to be secure. You did prepare me. You taught me to work hard, to be independent, to stand up for myself. The fact that I used those lessons differently than you expected doesn't mean you failed. But you're alone. No, Dad, I'm single. There's a difference. I have friends, community, family. I have a full life. And this Daniel? Daniel is someone I'm getting to know. Someone who adds to my life without trying to complete it. Dad nodded slowly. He seems like a good man. He is. And your work? You're still thinking about that Denver opportunity? I was surprised he knew about it. Mom must have told him. I am. It's a chance to build something new, to challenge myself in a different way. That's exciting. Scary, but exciting. Yeah, it is. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, and I realized this was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. Maybe ever. I'm proud of you, Maya, he said finally. I should have said that more often. I should have said it instead of what I said at the reunion. Thank you. That means a lot. I may not understand all your choices, but I respect them. And I respect the woman who's strong enough to make them. The next morning dawned clear and bright, perfect wedding weather. I stood beside Marcus in my navy blue dress, watching him beam as Amanda walked down the aisle in a simple but elegant gown that perfectly suited her personality. The ceremony was beautiful and intimate, exactly what they'd wanted. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, I felt a surge of pure joy for my little brother, who'd found his person and was brave enough to commit to building a life together. At the reception, I gave a toast that I'd been working on for weeks. Marcus asked me to be his best woman because he said I taught him there's more than one way to build a good life. But the truth is, he taught me something too. He taught me that the best choice isn't always the safe choice, the expected choice, or even the choice that makes sense to everyone else. The best choice is the one that aligns with who you are and what you value. I looked out at the gathered family and friends, my eyes landing on Daniel, who smiled encouragingly, then on my parents, who were listening intently. Marcus and Amanda, you've chosen to build a life together based on love, respect, and shared values. That's not the only way to build a good life, but it's a beautiful way. And I'm honored to witness the beginning of your adventure together. As the evening wound down, I found myself on the back porch with Jennifer, watching our kids dance to music playing from someone's phone. You did good today, she said. That toast was perfect. Thanks. It felt good to say those things. And Daniel seems lovely, very steady. He is. We're taking things slow, but it feels right. Are you going to take the Denver job? I think so. Daniel's actually excited about it. He's been wanting to photograph the mountain communities out there. So he'd come with you? We've talked about it, not moving in together exactly, but being in the same city, seeing where things go. Jennifer smiled. Look at you, making choices that feel right instead of choices that look right. I learned from the best. What do you mean? You chose medicine when Dad wanted you to do something more feminine. You chose David when Dad thought you should marry someone with more traditional ambitions. You've always made choices that honored who you are. I guess I never thought about it that way. The difference is, your choices happened to align with what looked traditional from the outside. Mine didn't. But we were both just being ourselves. As I drove back to Austin that night, Daniel sleeping in the passenger seat after the long day, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected. Not because anything had been resolved or fixed, but because I'd finally stopped needing it to be. I was 32 years old, unmarried, childless, about to move to a new city for a career opportunity. 6 months ago, at that reunion, those facts had felt like evidence of my failure. Tonight, they felt like evidence of my courage. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Dad. Proud of you today. Proud of the woman you've become. Travel safe. I smiled, typing back. Thank you. Love you too. 3 months later, I was standing in my new apartment in Denver, boxes stacked around me, looking out at the Rocky Mountains in the distance. Daniel was setting up his photography equipment in the spare room that would serve as his studio. We'd decided to try this adventure together, two independent people choosing to build something new while staying true to who we were. My phone rang. It was Mom. How's the move going, sweetheart? Good. Great, actually. The apartment is perfect. Daniel's already gotten 3 client inquiries, and I start at the office tomorrow. And you're happy. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, Mom. That's all I've ever wanted for you, Maya. To be exactly where you're supposed to be. After we hung up, I stood at the window, watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. I thought about that night 6 months ago when I'd driven away from the reunion in tears, feeling like the disappointment, the failure, the one who'd gotten everything wrong. I wasn't that person anymore. Or maybe I was still that person, but I'd learned to see her differently. She wasn't a disappointment. She was someone brave enough to disappoint others in service of her own truth. Daniel came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Penny, for your thoughts? Just thinking about journeys. How sometimes you have to get completely lost to figure out where you're going. And where are you going? I leaned back against him, watching the last light fade behind the mountains. Forward. Always forward. the disappointment. Those words had once felt like a verdict, a final judgment on the life I'd chosen. Now they felt like a beginning, the moment I'd stopped trying to be who I thought I should be and started becoming who I actually was. And that person, independent, ambitious, loving, complicated, perfectly imperfect, was someone I was proud to be.